So I want to talk about a totally sort of different thing at first, which is an idea. So I had this idea like 2 days ago. And actually, let me back up a second and say that what I was thinking about was, first of all, watching Craig's talks on YouTube, that I think that most people are obviously not doing this, because if they were actually listening to what Craig was saying, we'd be building a whole lot of stuff right now that seems to be very, very sort of, very early stage. So what I think is going on is, after all this time, Craig is dumping out information finally, because they've patented all this stuff, and finally explaining things to people. And what's going on is, you have people that, basically people like us that actually listen to what Craig is saying. We can act on this information because he's genuinely explaining things, and he's doing it in this weird sort of high-level way where, like, actually he's still being completely ignored by the entire rest of the cryptocurrency industry. So what I'm doing, that I'm gradually realizing, holy shit, I have like years on these people because they aren't listening to any of these things, okay? So what I'm going to explain is this cool idea I had that, well, this isn't my idea at all. What it is Craig has been talking about this for frickin' ever. And even though I'm working on this and understand all these things, even I didn't understand what he was talking about until it finally clicked with me. So I'm going to explain this stuff first, because you can start to understand how we're going to build MetaNet and how your business can fit into all of this stuff, and the software that you write plays a role in all these things. So replacing TCP with payment channels. So here's the insight I had the other day. Watch Craig's talks on things like the CoinGeek YouTube channel and stuff like that. He talked about Turing completeness. Okay, who knows the history of Turing completeness of Bitcoin? Let me briefly tell you. Okay, here's my understanding of the history of Turing completeness on Bitcoin. Craig invents Bitcoin, doesn't explain anything to anybody, he just puts the code out there, and 5 years later he does an interview with, he's on this like panel with a Bitcoin Bell, and just says Bitcoin is Turing complete. He just says it. And Nick Szabo's like, you're an idiot. It's like, that's their response to this information, right? He's like, what should be like, really, tell me more about the no. Come on, you should write a paper on that. You're clearly dismissing the whole idea, right? Didn't understand, because by that point you already had this culture of people that are certainly the sort of fake experts. People that don't really understand these things, but because Satoshi wasn't there, they're the people that just filled this sort of leadership gap and basically pretended to be experts. These people, by and large, don't really know what they're talking about, okay? Including Nick Szabo, who people like Dan Held, who thinks Nick Szabo is Satoshi. Give me a frickin' break if you know about any of this stuff. Nick Szabo, okay? Listen to the stuff Craig says about Nick Szabo. If you really understand Bitcoin, it's really quite nothing like BitGold, okay? Nick Szabo has had his profile elevated for that reason. We would not know who Nick Szabo was if not for Bitcoin. He is getting this sort of reflected fame because Satoshi just wasn't there in the public eye. So anyway, Craig says it, okay? And then what happened was, first of all, inside InChain, they're doing all the stuff that no one knows about on the outside. My former co-founder, Clemens Lay, we just watched the talk, and I explained to Clemens about script in Bitcoin. Clemens had a PhD in automata theory, which happens to be exactly the thing that you need to understand to prove Turing completeness of things. Clemens was able to independently figure out that Bitcoin is Turing complete. We're going, so wait a second. How can this be that Bitcoin is Turing complete and all these people are saying that it isn't, and that Ethereum is better than Bitcoin because it's Turing complete? Because they didn't actually understand. So anyway, Clemens figures this out. This is how we get in touch with InChain. I'm not going to tell the story and all that stuff, but the point is, later on, finally, this information is years and years and years go by, and nobody has figured this stuff out until Craig finally starts dumping the little bits and pieces out there that allow people who are paying attention to figure out what he's talking about and fit all of the pieces together and understand how much bigger this system is than anybody previously realized, okay? And it makes all of these altcoins look so silly. So I'm going to explain what I figured out that's based on everything Craig was saying. So what it is how is Bitcoin Turing complete? There's the new way that I didn't previously understand. So very, very, very briefly here. First of all, in computer science, you have this theory of automata theory. This is the idea of a very simple computer that has a state, you have a transition function, you have an input, you transition the state to a new state. It's a very simple computer. You can make very advanced computers this way with sophisticated states. You can make it more advanced by adding in a stack. That's called a PDA, a push-down automata, or push-down automaton. A 2 PDA is a 2-stack push-down automaton, Okay? These are known to be Turing complete if you have an outer loop. If you look at script, script is a 2 PDA. It has 2 stacks. You can move from one stack to the other and you have all these opcodes in a row. It's exactly like Forth. If you look that up, another bomb that Craig drops that no one listens to any of this stuff, but read about Forth. It's exactly like that. How do you make it Turing complete? You add a loop. Where's the loop in Bitcoin? There's no looping construct. They just think it's not there. It's because they don't understand. So where the loop is inside of a payment channel, built in since day one from the very beginning. Okay? The way you do this is you have an output that is a script. Scripts return values. Another thing that no one ever used, ever. The output returns something, not just money, but information. It's there. Okay? When the script executes, the stack is still there. What's at the end? There's a stack there, there's data there, you can put stuff in it, it's information. You can take the information and the return value of the output, plug it into the input of the subsequent transaction, feed it back in again in a payment channel. You're looping the same script over and over again. Okay? It's the same script with data being passed back into it over and over again as you update the payment channel. That's the outer loop. Okay? We are 10 years into Bitcoin. How come people like Mike Hearn didn't figure out that Bitcoin was Turing complete when he was doing all this work on payment channels early on? I'll tell you what happened to Mike Hearn. Mike Hearn was one of the people that were trolled out of Bitcoin by, and I can tell my emotional state, and I'm going to cut myself off before I start railing on these people, but Mike Hearn was trolled out of the industry by the people that created the multi-hundred-billion-dollar problem we have right now, which is the vast overvaluation of every altcoin. They look so stupid when you understand these things. Why did people invent Ethereum and pitch it as a Turing-complete Bitcoin when it's... Didn't you know that Bitcoin is Turing-complete? They didn't know. Okay, none of these people knew any of these things. So when you start thinking about how the system works at scale and you fit the pieces together, these other altcoins are terrible. They didn't understand any of the things that actually matter to really make the system work globally. You have to understand, this is going to be very important, okay? When we actually build the system at scale, we're going to be using these things. When Craig throws out things like recursion, okay? I've about 50% figured out what he's talking about with recursion. But I'm going to give you more information here. I'm pretty sure I will be able to figure this out soon, and I'm pretty sure anybody in this audience that is understanding everything that's going on, go home and figure it out. How do you do things like that? How do you do all these more advanced things inside script? Okay? Now, okay, so replacing TCP with payment channels. So again, I talk fast because I want to, rather than not say the technical things, I just say them very, very quickly. So the internet has a protocol stack. It's based on IP, TCP, IP. IP is all about having an IP address and being able to send packets over the internet to somebody's IP address. It's about just sending the data really quickly. There's another protocol called TCP. TCP is Transfer Control Protocol. This is all about actually sending many packets in a row, basically, and doing it in such a way that the other party can actually reassemble packets in order and either get the entire message in the correct order or not. It's a way of establishing a communications channel with a counterparty. So the missing thing on the internet, TCP IP, it's about communications channels. You know, go back and study the history of information and things like that. That's a very important thing that we have this now. We have global communications channels. That's cool, but what's missing from this is actually money. So we actually don't have money inside of that channel. You can replace TCP with payment channels, okay? The way this works is in IPv6, and you need IPv6. Why was Craig throwing out mentions of IPv6? Okay, go back in and read the articles where Craig talks about IPv6. You can send giant packets in IPv6. What you can do is you can have a Bitcoin address, okay, which is a way of signing stuff, doing whatever you want to, which you can actually convert into an IP address and use hash-based routing. I can create a transaction that is the first transaction in a payment channel, send it over the internet, and it gets to you because it goes to your Bitcoin address, okay? I literally send you a transaction directly to you over the internet, okay? Now, it's the first transaction in a payment channel. We now have a connection. It's not just information, it's information and money, okay? It's the first of 4 billion updates or something like that, whatever the max int is in a sequence number, that we can update this payment channel over and over again, okay? So what we do is, now instead of just communicating, we can send money in the payment channel, okay? We can do anything. We can do contracts, We can do these sophisticated predicates that allow you to create a condition on whether you get the money or not. So let's explain a concrete example. Let's suppose right now what we do is I SSH into my server, and I'm worried that my server is going to get hacked. So what I want to have permanent immutable logs, and I want to also be able to charge tiny amounts of money for the connection, because this is the missing piece. What I do is I set up my SSH server. Under the hood, instead of using TCP, I'm actually using a payment channel. Okay? The users, when they log in, they're establishing a payment channel. And for each little tiny message they're sending, they're paying some very, very small amount of value for these messages. It should be quite small. I mean, it's flexible in that as your creator of the service, you do whatever you want to do. Okay? But the point is, it's very small. You're probably not even going to notice things like this. It can be abstracted away for the end user experience and all this stuff. But anyway, you make these tiny payments to log into your SSH server, and it's actually happening over payment channel. And two things. One is that the fact that it costs some small amount of money actually prevents people from doing things like DOS attacks. So you can think about if they actually have to pay some tiny amount of money to even just open a connection, no one can just DOS attack your server because they'd have to spend little bits of money. Again, another thing that Craig said hints at that people just gloss and ignore and don't even read. The reason why Craig invented all this stuff originally, you go back to his original motivation, was to make a better internet based on economic incentives. That's what it is, under the hood, okay? It's about bringing money in there. Now we've got economic incentives. So if I have a server, and I have a bunch of connections that are TCP, and it's free, what's really going on is, it's like the government setting a price control on a product, okay, to look at it economically. If I were to sell milk for $5, and the government declares you have to sell it for $2.5, what happens is, it's not that the government created more milk, it's that they artificially lowered the price, and now people go in and buy all the milk, and now you have a shortage. This is what a DOS attack is, because everything is artificially lowered in cost to zero. We don't have the ability to do economics on the internet unless we add money. DOS attacks are shortages. It's a shortage of connections, okay? Everybody is artificially lowering the cost of everything on the internet to zero. Some things should be zero. A lot of things shouldn't be zero. A lot of things should have a tiny cost, especially if you're doing things like transmitting a large amount of data or running a service that lots of people connect to, and you want to prevent DOS attacks, okay? So one other insight here on this subject, the thing that clicked on me, and I was telling people about this, so I couldn't sleep like 2 days ago, so I was like, that's it! I understand the thing! It's so important, the thing that I didn't understand before. What is it? Think about what Bitcoin is. Bit is information and coin is money. In a transaction, you have inputs and outputs. Everyone has always described this as inputting and outputting money. And it's so funny, like, gosh, literally, like, people just didn't fill in these missing pieces. They went off and made this, frankly, scam industry instead, and didn't care about actually understanding any of these things. What they cared about was pumping and dumping coins and getting people to invest in their stupid, projects that are going to fail. So anyway, I lost my train of thought. Anytime I get angry about these people, sorry?
Inputs and outputs.
Inputs and outputs. Okay, yeah. The key thing about Bitcoin. I get so angry about them that the key thing about Bitcoin, it's not just inputting and outputting money, it's inputting and outputting information. And very clearly, here's the very specific thing that I never understood until 2 days ago. I'm pretty sure almost no one else understands this. It's the idea of taking that value that's at the stack at the end of the output. That's the information. That's the information that you can then plug into the input and you loop it in a payment channel. Bitcoin literally is, the transactions literally are inputting and outputting money and information. It's both of them at the same time. And if you think about it that way, you could even take this, all these people making, they have such a peculiar and completely different perspective because in reality, they're literally scamming people is what they're really doing. It's all these people that don't understand any of this stuff. And what they're doing is hyping the hell out of their coins and trying to get people to buy crap that they don't even understand any of this stuff. Okay, so anyway, again, I still lose my train. I'm not going to do that again. I will stop railing on these people. So anyway, you look at it from that perspective, the direction to design Bitcoin is actually to create the transactions first. You then later have the consensus protocol. It's another thing that becomes clear when you study the history of a cryptocurrency, like going back to the 90s, David Shum and those things, Digicash and that stuff. this idea of a coin actually already existed, and Bitcoin just took that idea and put it in there. And then later on, the consensus thing was invented, and now we have this consensus layer. But at a deep layer, it's all these transactions. It's peer-to-peer transactions. That's the peer-to-peer nature of Bitcoin, right? Okay, so in a nutshell, this slide is simply about we can literally replace the internet with Bitcoin, and we get way, way, way better properties, okay? We still use IPv6 under the hood, but you can actually do payment channels instead of a TCP connection. We're like replacing half of the internet stuff with something that is a communications channel and money and smart contracts in one, okay? So you solve all these problems. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is simply the idea of owning your data. I think you look at this from the perspective of a sort of operating a business. I don't think this is simply about adding money into things. Money is just something you can do if you properly own your data, okay? It's not about making everything cost money. It's about, as the operator of a service, you should have the ability to charge stuff. As the creator of an article, you should have the ability to license the article, to sell it, to publish it, and things like that. Owning your data is actually the more fundamental thing from like a product perspective. Users should own your data. This is so different than the way the internet works today. All of these super centralized, sort of ad-funded products like Twitter, what has actually happened is these things are just being gamed. Civil is basically just being civil attacked. Okay, it's a DOS attack on your mind. For anybody that watched the video where I made fun of I made fun of the people who were like just trashing my Twitter feed, basically. What that really is, it's a form of DOS attack. Twitter messages are like artificially lowered in price. I should be able to set a higher price. I should be able to really own my account. I decide. It's not that everyone has to pay money for whatever. It's that for me, if I really own my feed, I don't want to see that trash. I want to be able to charge a price. That's just what it means. That's one of the things I can do if I own my data. Okay? So then I can do other things. The wallet I'm using, Twitter, sucks. I want to use a different one. I should be able to go to a different service, still have all of my data, still have all of my followers, etc. Okay, I'm going to blast through the rest of my slides because I spent so much time talking about how much the other altcoins suck that I have to do everything else quickly here.